feel the need to protect themselves, which can result in losing respect for another group or blaming that group for the present conditions. There is a history of long-standing animosities toward the group that is blamed, such as with the Jews in Europe and the Tutsi in Rwanda. Genocides recur when justice does not prevail. The failure to recognize and punish those responsible for past genocides has enabled others to carry out mass atrocities because the perpetrators are confident that they can get away with it. April 24th, 1915, this date marks the beginning of the Armenian genocide. Of the nearly 2 million Armenians living within the boundaries of the Ottoman Empire before 1914, only 500,000 survived. Armenian men were the first to be deported and killed. Then followed the mass deportation of elderly women and children. Between 1915 and 1923, they were forced to leave their homes and all of the belongings behind and march toward the Syrian desert. They marched without food and water, and they were frequently attacked by Kurdish bandits. 98 years have passed, and the wounds have not been healed. Current Turkish regime refuses to recognize the crimes committed. Turkey punishes those who dare to speak of the dark chapter of the Ottoman history, which brings me to my second contention. There is no universal standard for forgiveness. Did you really forgive? Forgiveness leads to forgetfulness by the oppressor towards the oppressed. Just because you say you forgive someone doesn't mean you wholeheartedly forgave them, which can lead back to the thought of justice. Forgiveness is not generational, yet only intermediate and impersonal. There are 4,200 plus religions, which mean 4,200 methods of forgiveness, which falls back into one of the issues that creates genocide. How can you forgive and not be bitter if you've generationally oppressed and unnoticed by your justice system due to the genocide in the first place? It is in human nature to have justice. Justice is clear, justice is present, and justice finds itself in man reality. Do you know how to forgive? Who do you forgive? Forgiveness, by its word, is flexible from the time period of 1864 to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 due to the inequality served in the time frame that forgiveness could not solve, which led to cruel killings of blacks in the South. Genocide begins where justice fails. Philandro Castile, July 6, resembled a robbery suspect. He told the officer he had a gun in his car with a permit and still shot him twice in the heart in front of his wife and his child. Alton Sterling, July 5th, shot him because they thought he was reaching for a gun in his pocket. Eric Garner in New York placed him in a chokehold after he said he couldn't breathe, where the officers still held him in the chokehold where he later died. Trayvon Martin, shot while walking down the street with a bag of Skittles and a bottle of tea. Another example would be the Wounded Knee Massacre. The Wounded Knee Massacre occurred on December 29, 1890, near Wounded Knee Creek on the Lakota Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in the U.S. state of South Dakota. Another example would be the bombing of the 4 church girls. On Sunday, September 15, 1963, there was an African-American church bombing on the 16th Street Baptist Church where 4 little girls died. This is an act of white supremacist terrorism. Due to the lack of justice, this leads to more events. The only thing that can fix these things is justice. Which brings me back to our mode for today's debate, that justice creates rights and liberties that socially allow protection and opportunity. Who does this advantage more? We should not look at what is better, but what is more important in the aftermath of genocide. And we see that it is the lack of justice that creates genocide, and it's justice that restores order for generations to come. Thank you.
Is it personal?
No, yeah, we got
First
teams.
team.
We go teams.
First question. Do you believe justice was served in Germany?
Do we believe
Justice was served in Germany?
in the immediate aftermath or present day now?
Anytime.
Well, yes, in present day now, yes.
Justice was served in Germany.
Yes, we can see that today now it is.
Does justice include forgiveness in
To allow forgiveness, justice has to first see its place.
Does justice include forgiveness?
Does justice
Yes
include?
or
No, it doesn't.
Okay. You say justice is more fair equality of opportunity to all people.
To the ideal definition that we gave, yes.
Yes.
Does it happen in the world? Anywhere in the world? Is there fair equality of opportunity of every single person?
Well, we can talk about how ideal forgiveness is all over the world, but we're talking about a system of justice, and that's the system that we have defined today.
Exactly. So basically, no. Okay. And last question. No.
So has justice always failed?
Has justice always failed? Yes, justice has failed. Unjust governments have failed, yes. We're talking about restorative justice to put justice back in the perspective that we have defined today.
If you consider restorative justice, how can you say? Can you expand on the fact that forgiveness is not part of restorative justice?
How so?
Let me explain. So restorative justice is based upon the idea of reconciliation. how can you say that restorative justice does not include forgiveness?
We're talking about justice in the sense of a vengeful repeat to the action done. So that is how you initially come back, because you have a sense of vengeance in the human mentality. You don't have a sense of forgiveness in automatic human.
So your type of justice is a punitive justice, where a person gets punished for what they did.
Justice is what cures the community for the healing. Forgiveness cures the interpersonal.
No.
The inner person.
Whereas,
So-
my question is your justice more punitive justice? The justice you're talking about, is it punitive justice or restorative justice?
It is and is in both. It requires all.
Both.
So how can you say that a community has been cured if after justice or successful justice that you're talking about, which in this case is punitive justice, has not resolved the conflict between different people? For example, like in Germany, you still have not rebutted the statistic that we gave you that still shows high signs of anti-Semitism, which is not present, for example, in Rwanda, where forgiveness is a central part of the restorative justice that's in there. So forgiveness being the central part of the justice system makes forgiveness the key to healing a community, as you said, by first healing the person. Could you expand on that?
Could we? I'm gonna need you to rephrase that one more time. I'm sorry, it got a little long.
Okay, so if, let's just say, how about we, all right,
It's good. Take your time. Take your time.
No, you're good.
We do, okay, cool.
Take
So, if you're going to say that you're looking at punitive justice, right? And how does that heal the community if successful punitive justice that you just talked about in Germany, for example, has not resulted in like a substantial, like, there's still anti-Semitism as the statistics that we've shown you show. However, a justice system that centralizes on forgiveness has shown to be successful. So how can you say that justice is what heals the community if forgiveness is actually what heals the community?
Well, how many examples do you have for forgiveness curing the community besides Rwanda specifically?
That's what I was going to.
Okay. Well, I'll let you guys go. You guys done cross-examine? All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
This time, two things. Let me remedy an error. It's my privilege too to introduce Eric and Sharif, who are both coaches for this team too, and that was my oversight before. And so I'm welcoming them. At this time, we'll open the floor for 15 minutes for questions. I'm not really going to referee these too much. I'll let these four folks go ahead and call on you and answer whatever questions you have. It may be beneficial to stand up. I'm not requiring it in any way, but it'll be easier for them to hear you. So if somebody would like to start and maybe address it to one side of the house or the other, we'll make it a little bit easier. Not everybody at once. Don't break your arms. Okay.
Can I address it to both of them?
Sure, absolutely.
You both are talking about genocide in terms of killing, but genocide can extend to the cultural annihilation of a people group, limiting their access to resources, their ability to procreate. How would both justice or forgiveness deal with that sort of genocide, where it could be a cultural genocide, not just a genocide of using violent means?
I was going to talk about it. So, I am afraid that if we talk about it now, they're going to find loopholes, if there are any.
Okay.
So, is it better if I say
You can skip me. That's
okay.
fine.
Thank you.
Reverend Brecker, can you say that one more time? I'm sorry, I forget so easy.
Yeah. So genocide is not just killing.
Yeah.
The actual definition of genocide is anything that prevents a people group from expressing their freedom and having access to resources. And so genocide can be not allowing people to reproduce, not allowing them to have cultural identity, forcing them to assimilate, for example, is a form of genocide. How would justice in this case address that kind of genocide that's not necessarily just taking of life?
You want to answer this or me?
You started now.
Okay, so In the definition that we gave in John Rawls' definition of justice, it talks about uplifting a socio and economic group that may be undermined due to the immediate aftermath and the genocide that we're talking about today. So what this justice would look like in the sense of the definition that we've given by John Rawls is that it's going to be able to give these people opportunity to get back in the community to where they were oppressed in the first place. Because you have a superior and inferior complex, you don't have any middle ground. What you need to do is you need to find the equitability through the legislation, through documentation that comes within your justice system and your government that recognizes it, that what they did before was unjust. If you create a just system afterwards with that documentation and legalization to help those that were oppressed to be equitable in society, not put them on a pedestal, but to put them equitable in society to be the other man, then you see that in the races and the generations to come from that will be able to stimulate from the goodness of that documentation that was implemented before. Because forgiveness at the point, you have to forgive. Every single generation, you're born into that. Whereas we see in America, we see that undermined minorities are born into lower socioeconomic understandings, which means they cannot handle the same things that people at a normal rate or a higher rate can. So it comes with more complicated obstacles. What justice does is it takes away those obstacles, saying you don't have to deal with them by yourself. We as a government respect that. We as a government respond to that. And because of that, we will uplift you and benefit you to be on the equitable ladder of society.
Can you define your method of forgiveness?
Define our method of forgiveness? Did you expand on that? What do you mean by that?
Like, what is your definition of forgiveness? If you're saying that just allowing them to go back into society like nothing, what is your definition of that? Do you think that's the correct thing to do?
It's never as nothing.
Our definition of forgiveness is there in people engage. Doesn't matter you're a victim, doesn't matter you're a perpetrator. Forgiveness is that there is engagement in society. That's our definition.
And it's not only like forgiveness, like victim to perpetrator. It first has to come from the perpetrator themselves. So you can't just look at like they've been trying to make it seem like you're forgetting what happened. It's just saying, move on, this person, move on. No, you face the issues. But forgiveness is all about understanding, both of the sides understanding that what has happened was wrong and it should never happen again. And then from there, you move on together in good engagement. That's where forgiveness lies. It's not about, we're just going to imagine everything didn't happen ever. That's not going to work. That's not forgiveness. What forgiveness is you sit down, look at the person, and you're like, okay, the perpetrator asks for forgiveness. They recognize their faults, and then you, as a victim or whatnot, not all the time, but you are able to forgive them as well, and you're able to move on together.
And you think that's the best way to resolve justice?
Resolve justice.
You think that's the best way to resolve things?
Yes, because if you look at the way justice systems works nowadays, it's always through the punishment. So basically, you do something. So it's an eye for an eye, basically. So since there's been an eye for an eye, it has not really eliminated any roots of the problem. So basically, people do not understand that they shouldn't do things. They just don't do them, or they do them, but they do them and they know that it's wrong. They just do them. For example, the example of anti-Semitism that was shown. If there was forgiveness in that society, there would be understanding of what was happening.
Thank you.
Am I making sense?
For the genocide, can you guys elaborate on your definition of genocide?
On our definition of genocide, you have all this stuff. Well, genocide, as Reverend Brecky was saying earlier, to our standards of genocide is anything that, like she said, rape, slavery, the mass killings that happen in the country due to two conflicts of two sides. Anything that has to do with the suppression and the anticipated, wanted extermination of another race or group would fall under genocide.
So do you believe that there is a genocide starting in America, or has already been started in America?
There's already been a genocide.
Well, I talked about that when due to the lack of justice is what creates genocides. I don't know if you heard me when I was talking about the examples of all the Black African Americans killings that have been happening, there was a lack of justice, obviously, so those people, the families of Alton Sterling, Eric Garner, they weren't marching down the street, for forgiveness. They were marching down the street, for justice. So that's where we